At 11:45 that morning, he arrived and walked straight into the building, up the stairs to where he could hear the sound of happy children. In his mind was the intention to murder as many of them as he physically could. He wanted to try and carry out mass murder of innocent, happy young girls. And over about 15 minutes, he savagely killed 3 of them and attempted to kill 8 more, as well as 2 adults who tried to stop him. It was of such extreme violence, of the utmost and exceptionally high seriousness, that it is difficult to comprehend why it was done.
These were the cold and decisive accusations read by the judge in the trial of a teenager who was only 17 years old, Axel Rudakubana. Within 15 minutes, he killed 3 innocent girls, injured 10 others, including 8 children and 2 adults who tried to stop the tragedy. His actions were described as cruel, extremely violent, and completely inhumane. An attack of the highest severity, which shocked the whole of England, and experts could not help but ask, why could a teenager commit such a cruel act? Was it the result of a distorted mentality, a failure in supervision, or the quiet rise of extremist ideology in everyday life? Join us as we delve into this extraordinary case. From the time of the crime, the identity and background of Axel Rudakubana, the investigation, the chilling testimony, to the harshest sentence handed down to a teenage murderer in recent British history. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other shocking true cases that we will continue to uncover. Axel Rudakubana was born in 2006 in Cardiff, Wales, to Rwandan immigrants. His parents, Alphonse Rudakubana and Letitia Muzaire, had moved to the UK after a period of unrest in their home country, hoping for a better life. When Axel was young, the family moved to the town of Banks, near Southport, Merseyside, where they lived a quiet life, and few people paid much attention to this quiet boy. At first, Axel was considered a calm student, even participating in activities at the local church as an altar boy. However, from the age of 13, unusual signs began to appear. Axel became interested in mass murders, looked up information on how to make poison, and once sent a text message to a child advice hotline with the chilling question, "What should I do if I want to kill someone?" He was found carrying a knife to school several times and used a stick to threaten his classmates with his name. During this time, Axel was also put on the British anti-extremism program PREVENT 3 times because he was suspected of being inclined towards violent and terrorist ideology. However, because he had no specific behavior, security agencies did not monitor him closely afterwards. By 2021, Axel was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, but instead of receiving intensive treatment, he gradually withdrew from society and sank into his own dark world, where murderers were idolized and violence became the solution. Axel was fascinated by genocide, Hitler, Genghis Khan, and stored hundreds of images of torture and killing on his personal devices. Before the murder, he tried to return to his old school with a strange appearance, a thick coat in the middle of summer, a mask, and a blank look, but was stopped by his father. Axel Rudakubana then planned the murder in cold blood, calculating each step with terrifying clarity. On the 13th of July, 2024, he quietly purchased a kitchen knife about 20 centimeters long, a simple but extremely dangerous murder tool in the hands of a vengeful person. In the following days, Axel continued to prepare mentally and physically for his crime. He searched for places where children could easily be reached, especially public places without strict security. Finally, he chose a children's music workshop held at the Lighthouse Building on Hart Street in Southport, an ideal place to attack vulnerable and surprised victims. On the morning of the 29th of July, 2024, around 11 a.m., Axel hailed a taxi under a false name and left his home. He was wearing an unusually thick coat, a black mask covering his face, and a knife hidden in his pocket. The taxi driver, unaware of his true intentions, took him to the right location. Security cameras recorded Axel getting out of the car with a determined gait, his cold eyes staring straight at the building where dozens of children were playing, completely oblivious to the impending disaster. At around 11:45 a.m., Axel entered the building without drawing any attention. He walked straight up the stairs, where the laughter of the girls attending music class could be heard. At around 11 a.m. on the 29th of July, 2024, Axel Rudakubana walked through the door with a calm, cool demeanor. No one paid any attention to the teenager wearing a thick coat and a mask in the middle of summer until he suddenly pulled out a 20 centimeters long kitchen knife from his person and began to attack the people around him in a frenzy. The first blow was a single stab to the back of a girl who was studying music, followed by a series of attacks. His every move was clearly recorded by security cameras. He moved from room to room, from hallway to hallway, looking for unsuspecting children, and then he attacked ruthlessly. Less than 3 minutes later, 3 girls, all in their teens, collapsed on the floor, dead from fatal stab wounds. Blood was spread across the wooden floor of the gym. 10 others were seriously injured, including students, a volunteer, and a staff member. Some were stabbed multiple times in the back, shoulder, and chest as they tried to run away or intervene. Most of the victims did not have time to react. They did not expect death to have the face of such a silent teenager. The attack only ended when an unarmed male employee in the building tackled Rudakubana with a plastic chair, pinned him to the ground, and called the police. When the police arrived, Axel did not resist and showed no emotion, as if he had just accomplished something inevitable. Immediately after subduing the perpetrator, Axel Rudakubana, Merseyside police immediately sealed off the lighthouse building where the massacre had just taken place. What the forensic team saw when they entered the scene was a scene of chaos, pain, and haunting horror. This was once a living space filled with music and children's laughter, but now it was bloodied and full of traces of crime. The bodies of 3 young girls were confirmed dead at the scene. All were scattered in different areas of the second floor of the building. All 3 victims were teenagers and died from deep, fatal stab wounds to the chest and neck. One of the victims had been attacked multiple times in a row, indicating a clear level of madness and malice on the part of the perpetrator. Blood was splattered on the walls, floors, and even plastic chairs, evidence of a life-and-death struggle. A total of 13 attack locations were marked, including classrooms, hallways, and reception areas. Of these, 10 people were seriously injured, with stab wounds to the back, chest, and shoulders, including an elderly volunteer who was injured while trying to stop the perpetrator. A kitchen knife about 20 centimeters long, still covered in fresh blood, was seized near the end of the hallway, where the perpetrator was subdued. Surveillance cameras installed at 3 locations in the building recorded the entire crime. The footage, which was later extracted for investigation, showed Rudakubana moving slowly, without haste, quietly targeting unsuspecting people, stabbing them decisively from behind or from the front. Analysts said the level of calmness and control in his behavior far exceeded the normal reaction of a person who had lost control, which further increased the severity and haunting of the case. The deputy commander of the local police later stated, "The scene showed extreme, cold, and deliberate violence. He did not come to cause trouble. He came to kill."
Became a scene of the darkest horror as Axel Rudakubana carried out his meticulously planned rampage. It is clear that this was a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence.
After being arrested at the scene, Merseyside police searched Axel Rudakubana's bank's home and made a shocking discovery. In addition to a second kitchen knife, they also seized a backpack containing books and notes, including instructions for making ricin, found with equipment such as test tubes, goggles, and raw castor beans, indicating that he had intended to produce the substance at home. His personal computer and phone were also examined and found to contain images of violence and massacre, documents on making drone bombs, extremist ideology, and a PDF of the Al-Qaeda training manual. All of this evidence confirmed that the attack at the music workshop was not a spontaneous act but the product of a deliberate, long-term criminal plan with a distorted mindset, a preoccupation with violence, and clear signs of mass attack intent. After being arrested at the scene of the attack, Axel Rudakubana was taken to Merseyside police for questioning. Despite the overwhelming evidence before him, from CCTV footage of him stabbing 3 young girls to phone records of searches related to famous massacres, to documents on ricin and deadly poisons, Rudakubana remained stonily silent. Throughout lengthy questioning sessions, he repeatedly refused to answer questions, offering no confession or explanation for his actions. His absolute silence convinced investigators that he had not only acted deliberately, but also completely without remorse. The chilling indifference in the interrogation room reinforced the notion that this was a well-planned attack, driven by twisted ideology and extremist beliefs, rather than a spontaneous outburst. The police then transferred the entire file to the prosecution. On the morning of the 20th of January 2025, Axel Rudakubana unexpectedly pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court to the murder and attempted murder of all the victims of the Southport Children's Dance Class Massacre. This brought the trial to an early conclusion, without a public hearing, leaving the victims' families without time to attend court, something the judge has formally apologized for.
The Home Office says those agencies failed to identify the terrible risk and danger that he posed. That information now being made public because the legal restrictions that were in place to ensure a fair trial, they don't apply now, because with those guilty pleas this morning, there will be no trial. And I have to say, it was completely unexpected when it happened in court this morning, when Axel Rudakubana, now 18, he was 17 at the time when this happened, changed his pleas to all counts to guilty. So unexpected, in fact, that the families of the victims were not in court when it happened. That's something the judge apologized for, and with what we're now learning this evening, it seems clear there will need to be many more apologies about all of this.
The Home Office later revealed that Rudakubana had been monitored by at least 6 government agencies, including the police, juvenile justice system, social services, mental health, and had been referred to the PREVENT program 3 times. However, all failed to detect the true level of danger he posed, leading to the horrific attack. 3 victims, Alice, 9, Bebe, 6, and Elsie, 7, were stabbed to death, while 8 other children and 2 adults were seriously injured. The entire attack was described as extremely brutal and meticulously planned, with Rudakubana moving silently through the area, targeting children playing and making friendship bracelets. He wore a face mask during the attack, the same one he wore to court. In addition to the murder, the investigation revealed that he was making the biological poison ricin at home and had a history of violence at school, using a hockey stick with the name of a person he hated as a weapon. He had also booked a taxi to the school where he was expelled just a week before the massacre, but was stopped by his father, a clear sign that he had planned it all along. The British Prime Minister has called for a public inquiry, saying there were serious questions about the state's responsibility to protect children, and pledging to leave no stone unturned. During the sentencing hearing on the 23rd of January, 2025, Judge Julian Goose presented video footage of the crime scene and surveillance cameras, describing the attack as a carefully planned act carried out with such extreme violence that it is difficult to explain. During the sentencing, Axel caused a disturbance by repeatedly shouting that he was having difficulty breathing and having chest pains, forcing the judge to remove him from the courtroom and continue the trial in his absence. In the end, Judge Julian Goose imposed a life sentence, with a minimum of 52 years before parole of the longest sentences allowed for a juvenile defendant, and making it virtually certain that Axel would die in prison.
I'm now going to sentence Axel Rudakubana, having explained my reasons. On counts 1 to 3 murder, I sentence him to custody for life, with a minimum term which he must serve in custody of 52 years, less the time he's served already. He's been in custody for 175 days on remand, which will be credited. Therefore, the minimum term is 51 years and 190 days. On counts 4 to 11, I sentence him concurrently to custody for life, with a minimum term of 18 years, less 175 days served, on each count concurrently with each other. allowing for his time served on remand. The minimum term on those counts is 17 years and 190 days.
The trial ended amid a heavy silence. There was no joy at the verdict, but a consensus that justice had been done, albeit belatedly. This is one of the most shocking cases to hit the UK in years, not just because of its brutality, but because of the grim fact that all the warning signs were there, but no one stopped him before it was too late. Axel Rudakubana, who was just 17 when he committed the crime, had meticulously planned a massacre of innocent children. Despite being sentenced to life in prison and almost certainly never to be released, questions remain. Why were the earlier warnings from schools, anti-radicalization programs, and security agencies ignored? Was this simply a systemic failure or collective indifference? What do you think of this case? Is a minimum life sentence of 52 years enough to ease the pain of loss for the victims' families? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow more shocking cases, where we analyze every detail, every trace, and join you in finding the ultimate truth.